Our first speaker today we have is Josh Lukens and Daniel Oliver from the Alavara Grammar School, and they will be presenting to us about the user provisioning system, which is the UPS in Schoolbox. Let's get started.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. So, as introduced, I'm Daniel. This is Josh from the Illawarra Grammar School. We got up about 4 o'clock this morning, so it feels like late evening to us. But we'll see how we go anyway. So that's us. If you'll have to ask Anna, she didn't use the good photo of me that we sent. So our position at the school, the title up there is Systems Engineer. We're basically two of the IT guys. We've got 4 in our team at the moment. We all kind of take turns doing stuff that we need to with Schoolbox. We all know how to manage. We all kind of involved in setting it up in the back end and the day-to-day sort of stuff. So it's not, we don't really have one of us that does one thing, one does another. It's all just hands-on, depending on who's healthy or who's sick for the day and things like that. So basically, what we're looking at doing today, we've got some screenshots of what we've got set up in the UPS on our Schoolbox site. We're just going to have a quick look, go through them, see what we've got set up, and have a quick talk about why we've done it that way, and what kind of things it lets us do in Schoolbox, and hopefully it maybe answer some questions people have, or give people an idea of what sort of things we can do. So first thing we start off, just some really basic sort of stuff. Setting the user's username and ID, and the ID links is what links it to the sys in the other end, so it knows where it's getting all the right data from. The username in our case is the student username that comes from Active Directory, AD for the students and parents. Other easy things there: first name, surname, year level. It's just basically using the UPS to get some really basic sort of information from the sys to populate it into Schoolbox. Again, same sort of things we use. Only the main thing of note here that we're doing under the email address heading, the first 2 options, rather than automatically generating the email address from the username, for our site we have 2 separate email domains, one for students, one for staff. So what we do here is we're using the UPS to kind of force the correct email address or the correct email domain for students. Because we know in some cases the sys might hold a personal email address rather than a school one. We want to make sure that Schoolbox is allowing us to communicate with the students, the address that the students are going to monitor, one that we manage through the school. A couple of other quick things there as well. We're making use of the e-portfolios, so we're using the UPS to kind of set a couple of default things so we don't have to do it in bulk later on. So we're enabling the e-portfolios for students, and obviously we're saying that the account is enabled so they're allowed to log in. So more stuff here. It's basically just mapping the year level that we're getting from the sys, which is synergetic in our case, mapping that to a role within Schoolbox, because obviously the role is what lets you control a lot of access, who can see what. And we'll do a bit more with that in a minute. So again, more sort of simple stuff. A lot of this is kind of replacing what we did have previously in a sync script. It was just a PHP script that was written by the Schoolbox guys that just pulled the data out of either Edgemate we were using before or Synergetic now. And this is just this part of things are just replacing the basic sort of functionality of that. So this one's, again, pretty simple. We're mapping the campuses and the house groups as well. So taking the data from the sys, making, I suppose, a bit more user-friendly, going from codes to actual human-readable names so people can see what's going on. So the next one, the dynamic groups, were when we first saw the kind of release notes for the upcoming versions and things in Schoolbox. The dynamic groups was what really stood out for us about the UPS. That was kind of what, the little light bulb went off over our heads. So we thought, we started thinking of the sort of things that we could do with that, the sort of things we could use it for that we couldn't do before, or that we were working around before. At the moment, we do have, I suppose, some of the use cases we've got for it might be a little bit simple. We're still playing around a little bit, seeing if we can do some different things with it, depending on what our staff need, what the students need. But some of the stuff we've got up there at the moment, ignoring that we've got mapping people to a 2016 class, because we're good at managing these things apparently. So what this one's doing, I suppose, we're looking at, so we're getting the students' year level, and we're automatically based on the students' year level, we're automatically assigning them to particular home pages. So typically you would do this for Synergetic, we have a class code there. We'd link that to a home page in Schoolbox, but there are some kind of restrictions with that. You can't link the same class code to multiple pages. So in the case that you have, say, a class set up for an entire year group, you might link that to, say, a year group page for the dean to maintain. But in this case, we've also got pages for outdoor education, we've got pages for careers that we want to be available to all the students. We want to be able to make sure the students are getting notifications, make sure they're seeing any due work tasks, calendars, that sort of thing associated with the page. So because we can't reuse that same class, and we don't want to create duplicate classes with the same information, we're making use of the UPS to put the students in those classes based on their year levels. So next one. Now, the way that the UPS manages things, on the previous page, that was the rule. There was a couple of rules there to add people to the groups, but we also have to set it up to manage taking them out of the groups when they're no longer relevant to that particular group of students. So before, when we were adding, on the previous page, we add Year 7 to the Year 7 outdoor education page, and on this stage, we're making sure that they're not in any other year group. It kind of makes sure that there's no manual management needed for us when we roll over at the end of the year. So we don't have to give someone the fun job of sitting down and going through page after page after page worth of things to set manually. So one of the things we did as well, I think this is a good example of something where one of the things with Schoolbox is you'll often find there's multiple ways to achieve the same goal. This one in particular, I think we just happened to be in the UPS the day we were doing. Someone asked us to do this, but what we're doing here, we set up the house groups before. We've got a home page set up for each of our 4 houses in the senior school, and we happened to decide what we're doing here is we're checking the each student's username, and we're assigning them right access to those house home pages. So essentially, there are house captains and prefects and the sort of people that we want to be managing the content on those pages. And like I said, we're in the UPS that day when someone asked us to set it up, so we did it here. But you can do things more than one way. You could also manage the group membership on the page, add them individually. You can have set up home pages so the membership's moderated. Let the teachers manage it. Our teachers like things to be really simple. They don't want to have to think about it at all. They love for IT to do the thinking and they do the teaching, which I'm happy to leave things that way. So we happen to set that up for our students. Now, UPS also lets you work with parents and staff members as well. So we've got similar kind of things set up for the parents to do basic information, usernames, email addresses, that kind of thing. This in particular was something we did to try and make life a little bit easier for our teachers and to work around a thing. So some of you might have come across a case where you have a staff member who is also a parent at the school. So the way Schoolbox handles that is it creates one user for the parent, one user for the teacher, or for the staff member, sorry. But now I think since version 15, if I get my numbers right, we've been able to link those accounts so they can swap from one role to the other. In our case, the teachers it was causing a bit of confusion for them that whenever they logged on as themselves, it was giving them the parent first. They were wondering why they can't mark their roles when they're a parent. So what we set up was this in the UPS at the moment. So the rule here, this is one of the first ones we're using that actually takes a condition into account. So we're checking if we've got a list of usernames because we know which teachers we have that are also parents. We're saying if it's one of those usernames that's logging in, then we're adding a P and a dash in front of the parent login. what that means is when they use their Active Directory login, their same username and password for everything else, it's going to log them in as a teacher first. And they've still got the ability to log in as a parent, and they can still switch to the parent role, but they don't have to manage multiple logins. They don't have to worry about logging in as the right one when it comes time to set that sort of thing up. So that's what.
On that one.
Yeah.
Have you found a way to actually automate that so you don't have to manually populate that list of parents and teachers?
Not at the moment. The information's all there in Synergetic, realistically for us. So you could, if it comes down to it, the information's in a database. If we can make friends with one of the Schoolbox guys, maybe buy them a couple of drinks tonight, they might write a script for us. Yeah, it's on the list. We heard it here first. So this is one of the other things we're doing with the dynamic groups for parents. So one of the things the UPS lets you do for parents is you can have conditions or have rules based on what year levels their students are in. So you can rather than having to manage things manually, you can make content available to the parents and make sure that things relevant to them. So what we've got here is just a quick one to add. Any parents of a year 9 student get added to the year 9 careers page, so they can see the info. So they've got immediate access to the information that's relevant to them there. So the last thing, what now? So that's some of the things we're using UPS for as of right now. Going forward, it offers us a lot of functionality to kind of solve some problems that might have stopped us in the past. One of the main things is our school's got to focus at the moment on. We want to really take advantage of what we've got with Schoolbox. We've been using it for about at least 4 years now, I think. And it's been long enough that everybody's comfortable with it, so we really want to start pushing the sort of features that we've got. And part of that is we've also got the Schoolbox app from Digistorm, which I think they're talking later today as well. But one of the big things that ties that into the UPS is we want to use that to assign parents, students to groups, because then if anyone that's in a group gets notifications, once they get notifications, that can get pushed out to the app, and it helps us out a lot with the school being able to communicate directly to parents and students and members of the community, and being able to set things up in the UPS to manage those kind of groups means nobody has to manually manage pages or lists or admin rights to things. We can kind of set it up based on information that we already have. So saves us, I suppose, a bit of hassle trying to do things that way. But yeah, I suppose that's just a quick overview of what we've had and how we've used it. I'm sure there's other cases that people have got, and we'll probably hear a few by the end of the 2 days. But yeah, that's all from us, I think.
Thank you. Any questions?
We don't have anything in Schoolbox for alumni or that kind of thing at the moment. I did recently ask a question about getting future students in there, and I imagine the same sort of idea would work for alumni, in the sense that I was going to say name and shame, but I can't remember who it was that I got an email back from. They said we have to do a manual import to get the users in the system, then the UPS can manage them from there to give them the groups and everything that's relevant to them. But now, at the moment, students that leave the school, they kind of get rolled out of current students. The data is still maintained on the SIS end, but Schoolbox doesn't. Not doing anything in Schoolbox for them at the moment.
Yeah, we do have a ticket open with Schoolbox trying to resolve that issue. And I encourage you, I think there's a job in the forums about that. So if you guys can get onto that, because that is an issue that we have too.
Cool. Any other questions while we're up here and heads in the right spot?
A quick one around, you mentioned around that 2016, is this something you have to do every year, or is there a copy process, or is it standard across each year?
That one in particular, that page was for our, because we're an IB school, so that was for a page we set up for the PYP exhibition, which we use create a new page each year, which means stuff that the student, we do it that way, so when a student goes into year 7, they can go back and point to all the cool things that they did for exhibition. The way that we use it, we have to update that every year, but I imagine there's a better way than what we're doing. We just haven't really sat down and thought it out yet. But we give ourselves, like, we've got a Google document that just grows every day of things that we got to keep an eye on at the end of the year, and that's one of them at the moment. Cool. No other questions, and I'll hand you over to the next speaker.
All right, everyone. Our next presenter today is Tina Boone from St. Patrick's College, Launceston. Tina, off you go. All yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. There we go. So that's me, of course. I'm Communications and Community Relations Officer at St. Patrick's College. So I'm a little bit different from these presenters here. I have a role that combines like development office duties, and I'm also partly Schoolbox administration, so a bit of a varied role. So I do work closely with the IT department and also with the e-learning coach at the college. So my presentation will be a little bit different focus from what we've just seen. So St. Patrick's College, just a little bit about that. We're a co-educational school for years 7 to 12 with about 1,500 students. For us in Tasmania, it actually makes us the largest secondary school there. So again, coming from my background, marketing, communication is the key for me. We also have approximately 200 staff members, and we have 3 schools, so a middle school, a year 9 campus and a senior school. So, where did we come from with the UPS and why it works for us? We installed Schoolbox back in 2012, 2013. And we had our school information system, which was FileMaker. Some of you may have heard of that. So it's a very old system. And of course, they didn't talk to each other. And because the two didn't talk to each other, Schoolbox languished at our school. FileMaker had been really heavily customised at our school, and it really suited our needs. So staff members weren't really keen to take on Schoolbox, and they weren't really keen for a new assist system, but we, at the start of the year, introduced Synergetic. So now we have 2 systems that talk to each other, which is fantastic. And so the staff members now needed to start using Schoolbox to its full capacity. So it was our job to sort of make them realise actually how wonderful it is and what it can do. So as I said, coming from my background, I wanted to focus on making Schoolbox the community portal that delivered everything. Everyone knew where to find it. I wanted to do away with printed newsletters, PDF bulletins, emails sent home, all that sort of thing. So I wanted to target the information. I wanted it to be relevant. And this was all great, but in theory, I sat down one day and I wanted to email our Year 12 students about something that was coming up, and we had nothing set up in our system. I had to email the whole student cohort and just said, Year 12s, please read this. So this is how the UPS became important to us. So I'm probably taking a step back here, and you might already know what the UPS system is, but just it allows user accounts to be created and updated on an automatic schedule from your school information system. So it's really powerful, as you've seen. If you aren't using it at the moment, you probably have some basic UPS rules set up that came with the system. things like usernames and email addresses pulling across year groups. But think about how it can work for you, what you can do with this information, and use it to its full advantage. What we wanted from it was really a set and forget solution. So, like the gentleman before, you just don't have time, do you, to manually update lists and groups and things like that. So I kept coming back to this relevant information. I wanted groups set up, I wanted to know they had the correct people in them, and I didn't want to have to remember to add or remove them at the end of the year or when they left the college or that sort of thing. So even when students move around year groups or things like that. So that was it for us. We just wanted to set and forget. So how did we set it up? We had lots and lots of... Sorry, I've missed a slide there. We had a lot of work to do. When we set Schoolbox up, as I said, it was languishing. We had one campus for every student in the school, and we had a teacher's role and a parent role and a student role. So obviously we needed to break them down further. We decided not to drill down too much, so we set up our 3 schools and a few different roles, just again broke it down. So we decided we didn't want to create too many campuses, too many roles, because with the UPS we could get all the information to who we needed it to. So we set it up with a lot of help from Schoolbox. Really, these guys are your best friends when you're setting this up. As I said, I'm not IT. I do work with the IT department, but I read a lot, and as I said, the Schoolbox guys were great. We also played around a lot on the development server just to see if the rules worked, if you can break things quite easily. So there are lots of rules and conventions, and each rule builds upon the previous one that you've set, so it sort of executes from the top down. So you really need to have your order right as to where it puts who in what group and when. So as I said, when you start talking about the effects and the conditions and all of that, you need to have your sequencing right. So where do you find it? You go to administration and you find your user provisioning system tab, and head in there, and then you'll start to see things like this. So again, a bit of a overview of what it does there. But so you have student, parent and staff tabs that you set up there. So we have those 3 roles. And here's just a quick example of what our student rules look like. Once they're expanded, they are quite long. So we started with student groups really to start with. This one here is a year 11 student. So he automatically gets added to his house. So we have 4 houses and then broken down into sub-houses. So he goes to MacKillop Barry, he gets automatically put into our library page, and he automatically goes to his year 11 page. So now we didn't have to think about it. You could communicate with this year 11 student. You didn't have to sort of say, attention year 11s. And house heads saw how well it worked, so that's where we came up with adding them to the houses. So we've continually built on this. Every time someone sees how well it's starting to work, someone else comes to us and asks us, can this be done? So it's great getting everyone involved in it. Some of you, as I said, are probably already doing this, but if you're quite new to it, I'd suggest thinking about what you want to achieve from it. Have a plan. Remember each rule builds upon the previous one. As I said, use the development site to test your rules. You can use the live site and do dry runs, but playing around in that development site is fantastic. And I'm not sure how many times I had to ring Schoolbox because I said a rule, changed my mind, then it broke everything, so get in contact with them. One thing I would say from our point of view, and we're constantly working on this, is probably try not to have too many rules. It does get complicated. And to start with. Start small and build from there. So what went well for us and not so well, it really is set and forget. It makes creating groups easy, the communication, we were talking about the Digistore map, things get pushed out, it is fantastic. One thing when I talk about current information here, we actually, as I was saying, we had FileMaker. When we got Synergetic, Schoolbox had everything from FileMaker, didn't talk to Synergetic, so now I've got a parent group list of over 6,000 parents in there, and it's horrendous. So we actually need to talk to you guys to try and sort something out. So make sure you've got the correct information in there before you do that. So just think about it again. It's just having a plan. And I just say go for it. You know, play around with it. It works. It's brilliant. Everyone loves it. Get everyone on board. See what it can do. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, I think we should grab Sam. Yay!
So, in case you don't know me, I'm Sam Bailey. I'm one of the sysadmins at Alaris, and I'm unfortunately probably the expert on UPS, and have done most of the tweaking for the queries that we use to get the data out of your sys, particularly the Synergetic and TAS queries. But I can probably tell you how to solve most of the problems if it's currently possible, or what our current workarounds are. So if you want to fire any questions, who'd be first?
Just wondering with the avenue users, say through a URL through the API, is there any way of getting users that have text as well as numerics?
Yeah, so what we're talking about here is there's a user management API, which is separate from the user provisioning system, that you can fire, add, change and delete requests to Schoolbox. There's actually a bug which has been reported where the external IDs, so not every system, Synergetic uses numbers for their IDs, not every other system does, and there seems to be a bug in that user management API at the moment that's not allowing non-numeric IDs to come through. I've currently got that. I've seen that come through. I believe the developer's already working on that. Down the back.
And we use it for sign on for groups through the first week's submission module that they have. Is there any way to use UPS to populate that as a group page in Schoolbox?
Not currently. With TAS, there is a new API coming that we're working on with TAS at the moment. And so some of the new functionality that we were looking at, we're waiting to see what actually comes through in that API first before we continue to modify our existing connection with TAS. But there's a similar thing where it may be possible to bring data like that as a pretend class code, and then you could use it as just a class code you could put on a page instead. Would probably be the way of solving that problem with the current connector. But we'd like to see what comes out of the new TAS API first, because it may already be in there that we can use. They're working on it at the moment. When it's ready, it will be out. We won't be stopping support of our existing TAS connector, so we will have both. Recognise not all schools will be able to switch full stop, and some will also want to choose different ways of running things. But that's under development at the moment, so it's, yeah, close, but not yet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Again on TAS, because you're going to have that new API from them, at the moment you put a P and an S in front of the parent code, say, is there any possibilities that is going to change? If we create users with that code, we're going to have to change them back to something, to their true parent code?
So when we change connectors, whether it's between two different versions of one connector, or even between different systems, like some of our schools that have moved from one system to another, not every time, but sometimes we have had to do a one-off global remapping. We just get the current list to the new list, and just ask Schoolbox support and we'll just do it for you, just as that one-off conversion when you're switching that connector. I'm not sure if it's going to be required in that system.
So we just don't want to have
Yeah.
about usernames to parents and then all of a sudden say, well, I got the wrong one.
Yeah, well, in terms of that, it's only the external ID that Schoolbox references to, in this case, TAS, that we're worrying about. You can still keep the same username setup that you were using before, and they can be separate, so they don't have to be the same. We can work on if that becomes an issue with the UPS going forward to create those accounts, we can put a tweak in for that for your setup. On that note of a few TAS schools, TAS has a couple of different ways of whether you want to handle parents as a family or individually. If you are using the UPS with TAS, it's going to work around the idea of having unique accounts per person, regardless of if they're in that family unit, in the way that TAS organises things. And so we do have I have been customising some of the queries for certain schools, not just TAS schools, for the user provisioning system. So if you do have a set of data that you need that the query that we are doing to your SIS is not quite right, and it's just not normal in the standard way of setting up things, there are ways of setting up a custom query that we can, in the case of, say, a synergetic school, you can create a custom view in Synergetic and we can change the UPS to use that view instead. A few schools will use that for pulling in future parents in a slightly different way if they use different filters from what's normally visible to us in the UPS. Another good example would be, say with Synergetic again, if you wanted to use the communication flags a little bit differently, because you can set a lot of custom flags in Synergetic. If you need to take account of those for how you use, say, email addresses in Schoolbox, it may be easy to set up a custom view and then ask us to connect the UPS to that. So you can still control how you're changing the UPS, what dynamic groups, doing different mappings on a day-to-day basis without calling us, but still have that using your data instead.
So there was quite a bit of noise in the room when we were talking about deprovisioning before. I've read one of the posts on the website, and there's one particularly from James that explains the logic is sort of reverse logic. At the moment you're looking for something in your SIS and taking action according to that. And deprovisioning works the reverse way around. However, if you expose something like synergetic constituencies, for instance, you could just add a constituency to students that you know are about to leave temporarily, put a rule in there to say if a member of this constituency then disable them or move them to a next student group. So that seems like a fairly quick and easy solution to be able to deprovision a large number of kids. Can you expose some other, you've just talked about custom queries, but rather than having to do a custom for 50 schools, could you just expose some other fields in the UPS?
Yeah, so I continually and slowly expand the token list that you've got access to. The difficulty that gets is that if I'm adding to that token list that you can control, I need to find something that is going to work as consistently as possible across not just one platform, but many different databases. And that's where I can sometimes get in trouble. The deprovisioning side of users, there's kind of, again, two facets to that. One is when you wanted to say just delete the users when they're no longer relevant to the system. You can do that through the user management API, which means you would control all the logic yourself and fire those delete requests at Schoolbox. But we've found when we tried to do it from just writing the rules in the Schoolbox that the edge cases that come up become quite difficult to manage, whereas the edge cases with adding users, the cases then they don't have an account. Whereas that can be fairly easily fixed. It's when they've got an existing active account in use, and if the rule isn't quite right and you accidentally delete a user, that causes a great deal of trouble. We've tried a few times in the past, as James's post would have mentioned, to achieve this, but without a great deal of success. That said, I am looking at trying to improve those things. Yeah.
If you create centre flags in your SIS to say, I want to delete that
Yep.
user effectively, then it overcomes those edge cases.
Yeah, and that's the hope. If you could expose enough information, then hopefully, based on the way your school runs your external system, we can write out a set of rules that will match. In many cases, it's still very variable. We're still considering some more improvements in that, aside from just exposing more data. But I was going to say, the other parts, particularly with alumni, I mean, parents is probably the normal one that needs the clean up, where they no longer have active students within Schoolbox. That's the one that I've been looking at as maybe an easier part to solve, because we can easily detect, as you may have seen for the UPS rule, it's a detect, don't create the parent unless they have students within Schoolbox that are already active. It would be an easy role to reverse, to remove parents when their students are. So that's one I am looking at already. The other one is about students who have left. And what has been in the past is quite a few schools for a long time have all deleted their students once they've left the school, whether it's 12 months afterwards or that sort of stuff. What's now becoming an option with version 17 of Schoolbox is alumni is going to be much more possible than it was before. Before, there was a big restriction with using alumni users in Schoolbox, and that restriction was based on server resources, where if you added a lot of extra alumni students, the server would use too much RAM to keep those in the system, even if they weren't heavily active users. 17 fixes that problem in the order of 3,000 student school will probably save between 3 and 16 gig of RAM on their server on just an idle basis. And adding extra users, whether it's 10,000 alumni users, as one school did do to me one day, effectively crashing that server, that's going to, the amount of RAM when processing that we use on the server is no longer related to how many students are in the system, and it was before. It's now purely related to performance and active use of the system, which is a very big change for us. It increases a lot of the performance of Schoolbox and our notification system, but it means also that we need to be able to pick up inactive students and still be able to control them with the UPS in terms of managing them in alumni groups, which is not something that we've really looked at up until this time because it wasn't viable. So instead of having to delete students, you could actually keep them in there and continue to use them and notify them and use the communication systems in an alumni way instead going forward. So that's my other hope, that I can use that instead of trying to do actual deletion, because then you can keep the account just with different access levels. Hopefully that made some sense.
This might be a more general question, so I don't know whether Tina from Tasmania in the comms role might be better to answer it. I'm talking about dynamic groups and year level groups specifically. We're sort of debating at the minute whether we include parents in those groups to actually make them a member of the group so that it's easier to communicate with students and their parents at the same time. I'm just wondering if anyone else has got creative ways of doing that, or whether that's something they're looking at, or any thoughts or anything.
And there is something we're working on along that path as well.
Okay.
So currently, as you've noticed, one of the main uses of dynamic groups is to solve notifications for parents. Because although they may have read access to a particular homepage, they won't get notifications unless they're directly related to that page. What we're looking at doing is adding some extra kinds of notifications where a parent can be notified based on a change to a page a student is directly related to. Whereas at the moment, it's mostly related to, that kind of thing does happen around due work and assessments and that, but there would be the option for, say, parents to be notified of a news item that's been posted on a page the student is related to. And that's something that we're looking at the moment, because there's a few different cases where dynamic groups can solve the problem, but there's a few other cases where it's, particularly with junior school, because if you've got quite frequently, say, prep year 1, year 2 kind of students, it's not the students themselves that are logging in, but they are related to pages using class codes. And what's happening in those is the teachers are posting information that's actually parent related. And so the parents can go into those pages and see it, but they're not getting the updates because it's just their student in that particular class. So we do have a dynamic groups in the UPS to handle some of that. There is a CSV thing that we can do to, say, put parents in home pages based on students, their student class codes, is another thing that we've just started doing. So if you're interested in that kind of idea, which I'll be talking a bit more about tomorrow in my managing permissions talk. You can have a chat to our support team about that, because that's another system we're setting up for that. But ideally, it'd be best if it would just be a notification to say, yes, for this page, I want parents of students in this page to get news notifications. And then you can control it using normal systems.
At the moment, is anyone else actually adding students and parents into dynamic groups? Is anyone doing it?
We do actually, yeah. We've got, just for our middle school, we've got parents and students all dynamically added to one group. Yeah.
How's it working for you?
Yeah. It's a bit clunky. I think because we use the main global news quite heavily, that one sort of doesn't get used to its full advantage. So something like what you're talking about would be good, yeah. So it can be done, but
Yeah,
it's not ideal.
Down the back, Sam.
We're currently doing that with UPS and dynamic groups. So across from parents, we set up a year level page for each parent. And using dynamic groups, we set up those parents that ordered year level for all over school. Those parents automatically feed to those parent home pages. So I don't have to manage instant edit every time that parent added to the system. Automatically with UPS and then dynamic group will those parents will feed into those parent home pages. What I'm looking forward to hear from Sam is when we have a class code, so for our early years, like Sam was just talking about, and that notification system where if you have a class code on that page, dynamic groups or UPS doesn't work, I'll look forward to hearing you getting UPS to work on a page with the class code on it, especially for our ELC and our younger girls.
So you should, a page can still be both a class and a group at the same time. So you should still be able to use UPS to put users in a group that happens to also be a class page. The problem is UPS doesn't see the classes, so it can't use that part. There is that CSV option that we've just started using, which is where we have to get a CSV that maps class codes of students to where homepage IDs, or group IDs that you want parents to be in. That we now have. I think we've deployed that about 4 times so far, but it's something that we'll be talking more about. That's our current workaround for this problem. Yeah, thanks, James. It is. Yeah, so Craig from Arden over here asked for this capability, and this is our current solution to that problem.
So this would be born out of this issue and trying to allocate parents to co-curricular classes. So it was very, very difficult to try and do that via the UPS. And the way we communicate with parents is always through the co-curricular classes in relation to sport, chess club, science club, and all those things that dynamically change quite often with students coming in and out of them. So we created a CSV file with Schoolbox that produces the class codes and is associated with it automatically as the parents of that. So it's been working successfully now for 3 months.
Yeah, it sounds about 3 months, yeah.
And that's something we can do now. That's
Yeah.
That was a stopgap solution for what Sam was using before, was we had parents receive notifications on behalf of students. The stopgap solution was we'll create a little script that will add parents into the class code groups, so that we can work around that solution in the short term.
Yeah.
Longer term, we want notifications to parents based on their students as well.
It's a good short-term solution, but if the parent, a new parent is added or something like that, you need to be aware of that and have them.
When you said this topic.
Yeah, yeah.
We use a bit different around that, whereas instead of switching from a CSV to use Active Directory security groups. So that way we can leverage existing security groups, which can be a part of other security groups, and then they switch straight into the Schoolbox group. So yeah, we got that really helpful.
Any other ideas, questions? The weather looks good outside.
So does that upload, that CSV upload also be provisioned
for those groups that it's managing, yes, it's removing the existing parents from that, well, if that group, if they no longer have children related through that relationship.
Well, this seems to be happening after the fact. So you're actually stripping everybody out of all the groups as a first step. So our review of groups, the list is about that long. So you're stripping all the parents out of the groups, and then you're re-adding them back in with the use of the CSB, with the system of marriage back up and back into the group.
So the script that we're talking about here, we normally run that nightly, so it's picking up the changes daily, just like the UPS would when it did its runs. Excellent. Well, we've got about 13 minutes before this session finishes. Well, actually, 10 minutes. So if you want to take a bit of a break, enjoy yourselves, have a bit of a chat, and yes, I will be assailable around the place throughout these 2 days.
Thank you, Sam. Very good for you.